Yo legends, enjoy the story and let me know how it hits. On the hot stove there was a deep frying pan in which the prepared food was bubbling. A girl in a light pink apron was deftly cutting leeks into small pieces. She brought a spoon of hot broth to her mouth to check the readiness of the dish. The wall clock, which showed 7 hours and 24 minutes, made her mouth open. The girl carefully opened the door of the room in which the light was not on. There was a sleeping guy lying in the bed under the blanket. The girl carefully sat down on the bed and patted his legs, saying that it was time to get up. She began to shake him by the side, saying that the young man might be late. He muttered something in his sleep. His ear twitched when he heard him being called father. The guy opened his eyes in fear, rising from the bed. He opened his mouth in bewilderment, scratching his head and smiling. The young man replied that he was already getting up. The girl exhaled. A friendly smile appeared on her face. She clasped her hands behind her back and, closing her eyes, told her father to quickly get up and go to breakfast. The guy thought that 2 months ago, because of his father's contract, he unexpectedly had a daughter 10 years ago. A fault appeared on Earth, disrupting harmony and tranquility. People noticing its appearance were horrified, not understanding what it was. The men with fear on their faces began to run away. From the open gap in space, anthropomorphic monsters with many teeth and extra limbs appeared from the rift in unimaginable quantities, which were impossible for an ordinary person to cope with. However, strange abilities awakened in some people regardless of gender and age. An armored man with a sword and a girl in a red suit stood in front of the monsters emerging from the portal. They called themselves hunters and without hesitation entered into battle. With the fiends of the rift, each of them could see and adjust their abilities using a status window very much reminiscent of the game interface. In the open window, the name, level, title, characteristics and abilities were written. The hunter controlling the window said that he still had enough strength. The girl in the red suit firmly stated that they should try again. The man in yellow armor agreed with this, and behind them stood several more hunters ready for battle. However, the main character did not have these abilities, and after serving in the army he quietly studied for 3 years, dodged and sat at his desk surrounded by books and wrote something in a notebook. Then he managed to get a job as a civil servant in one of the technical positions in the fault department and became the most junior among the other employees. The man at the computer desk asked how things were going with the report. The guy jumped up from his workplace. The young man did not shine with special talents. The curly-haired man waved his finger meaningly, asking if he was going to continue doing this. The character asked for forgiveness. But after a year of hard work he was still able to get the first task. Expecting a lot from the first serious day, John walked along the pedestrian crossing looking at his phone. After work he went to the canyon area in search of a fault that had appeared there. But suddenly turned around, seeing a bright light from the side. A car was moving towards him at great speed. The guy did not have time to react. On the street on which there was not a single person, a terrible metal clang was heard. On the way to the desired place he was hit by a truck, shielding his eyes from the blinding light. The young man woke up lying on the ground. The place where he came to his senses was a world called Murim. Men in medieval costumes looked at him in surprise as if he were an alien. With pagodas standing behind them, there was a fight in the large hall. People in gray suits were attacking each other with swords. Someone was lying on the floor motionless. One of the warriors cut the main character's back, forcing him to close his eyes. In pain he died many times. His body lay on the floor in a pool of blood. After he woke up in this world, he acquired the ability to revive him after death. The pocket watch was shrouded in haze. It returned its owner a day back in the event of death. John raised his sword above his head, preparing to attack. Armed people attacked him at once, screaming. The guy returned after death again and again. At some point he forgot his name, but finally became the strongest in Murim. The warrior sat on a destroyed column among many corpses against the backdrop of a fire. The residents of Mam nicknamed him Chin, which means heavenly devil. The bloodied warrior held his sword in his hands, thinking that he had become the strongest. Looking forward from under his brows, he did not understand how he could return back to his home world. The young man became the first, and as a reward he received the same sudden return to his reality. He woke up in a dressing gown in a hospital bed. When the patient was about to leave the hospital, the doctor behind him worriedly asked if everything was all right, and the nurse, covering his mouth with his hands, told him to come back immediately if anything hurt. Holding a sick leave certificate in her hands, the nurse clarified whether this was the same man who was hit by a truck and who had undergone a 17-hour operation the day before. The man, his mouth open in surprise, said that he already doubted it. The main character went out onto the street with many skyscrapers around, realizing that he did not remember Korea well and that it would take him a lot of time to adapt Dodge. And opened the status window. All his stats were level 999. He thought that he had become so strong that he didn't have to work. The guy in the formal suit looked at his hands, realizing how much blood was on them. Memories of all the events that happened in Murim, all the battles and fights, flashed through his head. Constant betrayals, countless deaths and revivals brought him to complete distrust of anyone. Stopping in the middle of the road, he thought that he would like to be normal. Fixing his gaze upward, the young man decided that this time he wanted to live an ordinary, quiet life. There was a huge clock hanging on the Seoul City Hall building. The doors were open, and the main character greeted his colleagues. The office workers looked at him in shock, and the woman covered her mouth with her hands in amazement. The curly-haired man opened his eyes wide and asked if everything was okay. With a Kalic expression on his face, Jun replied that nothing had happened to him. His colleague said that in appearance nothing had really changed. Raising his eyebrows high, the man noticed that his colleague began to talk strangely. The guy, looking away and scratching his cheek, asked about how his speech sounded. Before, a badge hung around his neck. His work uniform fit loosely on him. But the employees still noticed that his body seemed to have become stronger, although before he was fragile and timid. The curly-haired man, looking into his eyes, said that his height had also changed. Scratching his chin, the young man thanked him for the information. The senior colleague, waving his hand and squinting, asked if it was another person standing in front of him. Keeping a calm expression on his face, the young man replied that they may think that something in him has changed a lot, but it really is him.